All right, everybody. Welcome once again to the Rough Report. I am, of course, Jimmy Ruffian, reporting live from downtown Toronto. And we're going to be talking about stuff as we usually talk about stuff. Join us in the comment sections. Let us know that you're here. Ask your questions. Have your opposition if you have it. Let's have a discussion here on the air. I love when people join live and are part of the comment section. It's a good time. So we're going to be talking about a couple important things today. That's going to be the Notwithstanding clause for the most part, and of course a very recent tragedy that had taken place in London, Ontario. We're going to be getting into that stuff. Fun, lighthearted topics as always, I say sarcastically. On the Rough Report. It's a rough time. It's been a rough 150, 160 some odd years throughout Canadian history. So here we go. Let's get that music off. Well, I'm sure you guys remember a couple of years ago, there was some talk about Doug Ford invoking the Notwithstanding clause for the sake of shrinking the Toronto City Council from, I believe, about 47 members to 25. Something he was able to successfully do because essentially, as it is in provincial law, premiers in provincial governments can pretty much do whatever they like to municipalities, and whatever might benefit them and be expedient, politically speaking. And Doug Ford has done quite literally everything he possibly can to achieve ends like that. The mega city in the first place, and for those who don't know about the mega city, is basically Toronto is surrounded by many suburbs. Toronto itself being mainly a liberal, more left-leaning stronghold of votership in Ontario, while those surrounding suburbs were much more conservative in their base. So the Conservatives, way back when, 25 years ago, I might be remembering that wrong, but somewhere around there, conservative politicians got wise and realized, if we make this megacity thing and pull in all those suburbs of surrounding Toronto and consider it all Toronto as far as a voting bloc is concerned, we can sway elections heavily in favor of the Conservative Party. And of course they did that. And of course that's exactly what happened. So in terms of MPs and MPPs and, just basically our political representatives, suddenly the Conservative Party was getting a lot more seats in this area and getting basically by stomping on people's voting rights and manipulating their voting rights. And then, of course, shrinking the city council was just an extension of that, partially a personal bitterness he obviously harbored from his time in city council when his brother Rob was mayor. So a lot of layers of things going on there, basically. And because of that, he was able to get away with it because the shrinking of the city council, because like I said, premiers can do an extraordinary amount, or provincial governments and administrations themselves can do an incredible amount to manipulate municipalities, more so than what seems right. Of course, it's just a number amongst the number of broken laws that we have throughout this country, and in particular this province. But yeah, a judge tried to stop it, basically, but the argument that the judge was putting forward to stop it evidently not strong enough in terms of how the law is laid out and how it is written, and it just didn't work out. But at that time, when the judge was threatening to shoot it down, the prospect of slashing city council, Doug Ford threatened, I believe this was 2018, to use the Notwithstanding clause. The Notwithstanding clause in Ontario just basically sort of like being an emergency power, I guess you could say. It's never been invoked in Ontario. It's meant to override things that are considered inalienable, like when a provincial judge, for example, shoots down the Conservative proposal to extend third-party, basically, third-party groups that buy political advertising time in order to get their message out there. He wanted to put further restrictions on that. We'll get more in detail of that. And essentially, under the circumstances, the judge reasonably concluded, hey, that's pretty undemocratic, and you can't do it. COVID's a scam to take away your rights. You're an idiot as always, Brent, and it's delightful. You have absolutely no idea what you're talking about, and it's endlessly hilarious to me. Like, we've had a long discussion on this before. COVID's a scam to take away your rights. That's why they're starting to lift restrictions, because people are vaccinated. That's why things are slowly returning back to normal. That's why countries who took this seriously in the first place have been fine the whole time. If you think this is the plot on how they take away our rights rather than, forcing you to work ungodly hours for little wages and all the other myriad of things throughout our capitalist history that has shown you that they don't give a shit about people who don't have an exuberant amount of money's rights in any capacity. If you think this is the thing rather than all those other things, your observational skills are in the toilet, my friend. I enjoy when you stop by, though, because it just gives me something to rip on in this situation. Just pure blind idiocy. It's incredible. Like, your observational and logical skills are in the toilet. You really need to work on that. There is so much evidence of the just kind of hegemonic society that we have being fundamentally counter to people's rights throughout its history that you can pull real examples to be extremely upset about our government, but you have to have fantastical fairy tale examples that are right out of some sort of ridiculous Hollywood movie script. It's bonkers. It's just bonkers. Anyway, the Notwithstanding clause is basically an emergency power that allows to steamroll over basic rights, if the government sees it fit. It's kind of something that shouldn't be there in the first place, but again, it's one of those things that's never been invoked before because it should be considered extremely politically dangerous too. And it should be considered a very emergency situation to do so. But in order to override a judge's decision on how campaign advertising amongst third parties works, like, say, groups that represent unions, for example, were amongst the people that were going to be strongly affected by this. Because here in Ontario, some of the largest spenders in terms of political advertising time in third parties are unions and people looking to, get the message out about workers' rights and how important those things are and how our governments, both conservative and liberal, just less so on the liberal side, are pretty anti-union, and are pretty right-wing, all in all, in that regard. And make no mistake, right-wing ideology is counter to union ideology, is counter to the concept of workers' rights and unions. Right-wing frames of thought are fundamentally designed this way. This isn't like a conservative idea. It's literally just academic fact, political science fact. If you find a conservative that is pro-union, the fact that he is pro-union is a deviation of his conservative ideology, in which, I'm sure there's people out there who are like that. But, I think also Brent there in the comments, it has his name in Cyrillic, like it's like protecting his privacy from the Zuck. Meanwhile, anybody who has a passing knowledge of Cyrillic or Google Translate for that matter can plainly tell what his name is. Doesn't mean he's using his real name, of course. It's just funny. It's like, what do you think you're doing with the Cyrillic lettering there? What is that supposed to be when you're not, Russian or whatever? All right. So that's basically, putting it in kind of simpler terms, what the notwithstanding clause is, and, put it in perspective that it's never truly been invoked before. So in light of that, this is a pretty crazy situation, that he wants to basically, because when I was trying to read on this and get sources of how do I phrase this and put it in a simple way, I realized all of this sounds kind of slightly convoluted, even though it's all in all, once you kind of look at the whole thing in a broader scope, it's kind of easy to understand what's going on and what this notwithstanding clause things is and what it's like in regards to third parties. But to anyone who isn't used to reading about this stuff in any sort of detailed way, or is a little bit kind of outside a really conscientious media bubble, I guess you could say it as, anybody who's kind of in that position is going to largely look at this situation and just sort of not get it and blur it out, more or less. I don't completely get what's going on, but the way people are talking about it, it doesn't seem that wild. It doesn't seem like my rights are immediately being threatened as far as I can tell. It's just it's not going to set off alarms to people. I'm afraid there's certain people that it is setting off alarms to, like myself and people who are kind of engaged in that way. And it's not to say that people who aren't engaged in that way are somehow, worth less, all in all. But we should be aware of the fact that this is very much a possibility of how the general public can react to these sort of things when they seem a little bit convoluted, a little bit complicated, and a little bit too much or too far into the weeds in terms of political laws and bylaws and the rules. And it's generally speaking, people just don't care to know those details. It doesn't affect their day-to-day lives in a huge way. So why would they commit to understanding that stuff? So yeah, I think to a large degree, Ford, in light of that, is banking on this not being a huge concern to a lot of people. But the one thing you have to understand is the reason Doug Ford is doing this and was trying to restrict the greater amount of limitations on these third parties in order to limit what they can say and for how long they can say it leading up to an election, and how much they can exercise their free speech and media buying power to influence the election. They already had rules and regulations like this in place. You can have your criticisms of them. I certainly would. But let's say for the sake of this discussion, they were considered fair and stayed as such, and there was no reason that Doug Ford should have to take the 6-month period that was restricted from people making political campaigns leading up to an election and extending it to 12 months. There's just no reason to do this except for recognizing the fact that how the past few years have gone for Ford, the things that he has slashed, how it exuberantly made the pandemic worse for Ontarians and, let's face it, the nation as a whole. All of his bad decision-making over his term, especially in regards to the election, was going to be a huge point of contention amongst some of your more powerful groups who would be buying this media time. Basically, he is trying to keep people from making very relevant points against him. He is using his power in an abusive way to shield himself from any sort of accountability in regards to his failure in this over the past few years. And that has led to people dying. That has led to people suffering in a very real and direct way. He doesn't want to hear about it. He doesn't want to be accountable about it. And he certainly doesn't want you to hear about it. So that's why we got to be big and loud about this. And the fact that he likely can get away with using the notwithstanding clause to shove this thing through means, in the fact that he's threatened to do it before, even though he didn't need to at that time, he probably certainly would have back in 2018. But he's certainly going to keep doing it. And this is a guy who isn't used to being accountable. This is a guy who's used to getting away with breaking the law and profiting with through whatever way he sees fit. He's a snake oil salesman. As long as he can get away with it, it's good and right. This is who he has always been. He has never shown the public anything else. Any other angle, nothing. Show me one example of him not being that way. I dare you. It doesn't exist. It just doesn't. So yeah, basically, yeah. Huh. Moments after tabling a bill invoking the notwithstanding clause, Ontario's Attorney General ducks the media claiming to be on a conference call. Just outrageous. Of course, ducking the media, avoiding accountability in all sort of ways. Doug Ford should resign and should be forced to resign for a number of reasons. As much as Andrea Horvath, speaks against Doug Ford on this stuff. The fact is, it's toothless. Like, they post stuff like this, right? The Ontario NDP's Facebook page here. Ford is lashing out in a desperate attempt to silence the critics, like groups sharing how working people died on his watch or families sharing how he failed to protect residents in long-term care. Stop Ford from attacking democracy. Basically, sign our strongly worded letter. None of this sort of approach has worked before. And if you're talking about a guy who is more than willing to invoke a clause like this in order to just stifle voices that are going to point out facts against him, and he is already willing to go there and be and break precedent to this degree and abuse his power to this degree, and plus all the ways he's abused his power already thus far. If you're all like, do you think a letter is going to stop him? The only thing that the NDP should be doing right now, the toothed thing that they could have right now to do, is to invoke people to participate in a general strike. and be active in the grassroots organization and mobilization of people against Doug Ford. That is the position that this party should take. That is the position that I believe all of us should take. But for the sake of organization and strength and power and influence in politics, the most powerful thing the NDP could do is to take a stance like that. And it's the only thing that's going to stop him, is to force him to resign. Let me tell you, this is only the beginning with this guy. He has demonstrated to us in every single step along the way and every little thing he's done that he has no scruples whatsoever. Hell, he didn't even show up today. He couldn't be bothered to leave his, fancy cabin in Muskoka or whatever to be bothered to show up to this thing. Like, what is it? Look at this. Yeah. Premier Doug Ford isn't present in the legislature for a history-making moment when his government will invoke the Notwithstanding clause. His predecessor, former Premier Kathleen Wynne, is. And now, say what you will about Kathleen Wynne, but I think it's pretty obvious by this point she was leaps and bounds a greater leader than Doug Ford. Doug Ford obviously sets the bar pretty freaking low, but you're also talking about a woman who did expand upon workers' rights and raise the minimum wage and things that literally nobody else was doing. That was providing a direct materialistic benefit to people's lives. So there she is. She is present today. But Doug Ford, the guy who is doing this to secure an election for himself in the most underhanded, disgusting, egregious way, by manipulating working people's collective voices, union voices that represent all of our interests, voices that were directly affected by this pandemic. We're not talking about super PACs like in the United States, like Sam Oosterhoff, the conservative idiot, is trying to promote. Oh, do you want super PACs like in the United States? This isn't about who is controlling. They're not worried about Ontario Proud having a stifled voice. Ontario Proud, as far as conservative rinky-dink, I shouldn't say rinky-dink because they're kind of massive, but just dumb as shit, organization goes, they're not concerned about stifling their voices. They already have a massive reach in a way that doesn't even require them to buy outside political advertising. But what is more in Doug Ford's interest, strategically speaking, in order to ensure this election win to as much a degree as he can under this circumstance, is to make sure that people can't point out bad stuff about him. That is the priority. That is what's weird. That is, it's an example of just purely how unscrupulous he is. He is literally trying to stop legitimate voices, not corporate money, not that kind of influence, but real people's voices about how badly his leadership has been in the harsh difference it's made upon people's lives. It's pretty outrageous, and yeah. So a strongly worded letter isn't going to exactly do it, Andrea Horvath. The only thing to do is general strikes, gathering together to force this government to step down, to stop doing what they're doing, to show as people that we are willing to take these steps to maintain our democracy and to maintain our integrity to as great a degree as we can. As I said in the last episode, if you truly want to reconcile with our history and make this right in terms of, how bad our entire history has been in regards to our treatment of the Indigenous and our stomping of their rights. Canada shouldn't even exist. It should cease to exist in the capacity that we know it. But given that it still does exist, Doug Ford needs to resign. And what could I say? We could have said every single episode, with Doug Ford, it's only going to get worse. And I would just be right. Week after week, it's only gotten worse. Now that we're seeing the tail end of the pandemic, now that people are getting vaccinated, now that now you're seeing restrictions being lifted, and we're going to slowly be able to return back to our somewhat normal lives if the variants do not become too much of a problem. Still a bit of a great area there, but still, things are on the upswing in that regard. So now, because things are on the upswing, we have to have another way that Doug Ford's just going to be terrible, right? And that is in the invocation of the Notwithstanding clause. So, yeah, I don't know what else to add there. It's undemocratic. It's unfair. It's obviously manipulative. It's just obviously typical Ford corruption. Any idiot that voted for this person, I'm sorry, you're an idiot. You weren't paying attention. You were thinking selfishly. You got wrapped up in the dumbassery of, Justin Trudeau's a secret communist. You don't know what communism is. You just don't know what the left wing is. You don't know history. Your ignorance has led us to this point. And I would invite anyone who disagrees with that to come onto this show, and I will discuss it with them directly and prove it to them, essentially. That you don't know history, you don't know what you're talking about, you are foolish and selfish. I openly invite that. DM me, send me an email, contact me whatever way you see fit, and I will have you on the show, and we will have that discussion. All right? All right. Where's the... Oh, yeah. Just give me a minute here, sorry. All right, so let's get into the London story. This tragic story, essentially about a racist maniac that allegedly was premeditated and decided that he was going to mow down a Muslim family in London, Ontario. I would imagine, I said about a week or so ago, 2 weeks ago, on social media, I think I posted on both Twitter and Facebook, that, the more I encounter and see things about London and its people, I got to think they as a town got to be a strong contender for some of the most racist shit in this province. Arguably, there's a lot of places that are racist in Ontario, no doubt. But they got to be up there. I was just sort of speculating, half joking, just in frustration of the amount of shit that I see come out of that place. And then, of course, soon after saying this, this happens. Mass murder of a Muslim family in London and Ontario. 4 of 5 family members. The only surviving member was a 9-year-old boy. His parents and his sibling was gone. Because a racist maniac in a truck wanted to target Muslims. That I have a hard time when once I start talking about this stuff, because I can't believe what I'm saying, or I wish I truly could not believe it. That I have to say this out loud, that a guy, because he hates people based on nothing more than some superficial thought about them, some stereotype or misguided stereotype or whatever, decided he was going to murder these people. And of course, you're already seeing the narrative in the mainstream media that he was mentally ill. Well, yeah, I would tend to think so. A lot of people in their right mind may not go ahead and murder an entire family with their truck. What gets me about that narrative, though, is they're using it to shield us collectively from the responsibility of how rotten and disgusting and racist our society is and can be. It's shirking that. It's trying to misdirect it by saying, see, the problem's over there somewhere. It's with this mental health thing. We can't control, that. But we can very much control the messaging we put out in society, how we tend to talk about this stuff, and how that affects our culture and the politicians we elect, the people we look up to, all these various intersections. We can improve on that stuff, and we've been badly failing. And we've been letting it slide in big ways for way too long. And this is some of the fallout that you see. So talking about it from a mental health angle completely dismisses the much more bigger and hateful problems that exist within our society that are evidently just too comfortable for some people to talk about. But they have to be. It's our responsibility. Hate is bred all throughout Ontario. But some of these more kind of outskirted, smaller towns, bigger conservative bases, there is obviously something deeply culturally wrong, and bigotry and xenophobia is woven throughout it. It's woven throughout our entire history. None of this, given that, should be a surprise. But yeah, back to what my main point was there. Be aware of the fact of when they're talking about this from a mental health angle, and how much they're not talking about it from a systemic racism angle. Because yeah, that's the bigger fish to fry here when things like this happen. Yes, we need to pay greater attention to mental health in all sorts of ways. How convenient it is that you only want to bring it up when shit like this happens, though. If you really wanted to talk about mental health and how big an issue that is, talk about the mental health of people throughout the past year in this pandemic, and what forcing them to go to work through a pandemic does, and when they don't have other options. if you were truly worried about prioritizing mental health, we would have been demonstrating it in all sorts of ways. But we only seem to want to talk about it when it's a deflection of our racist society. This individual killed that family, but make no mistake, he was born and bred here. No doubt about it. So we cannot shirk that responsibility. We can't pretend that that isn't a problem. It's these lone wolves that we just can't do anything about. Oh, how hopeless. What a tragedy. This isn't our problem. Yes, it is. Yes, it is. It's so bloody maddening. 9-year-old boy has no one. Think of what his life is going to be like now. Growing up, assuming he'll stay in this country, growing up here, knowing why he doesn't have a family. Really, try and put yourself in those footsteps, in those shoes. It is just heart-shattering. That, really, I hope there's a huge donation happening for this kid. Not that money is going to bring his parents back or anything. Going to bring back his family. But he certainly should not have to worry about anything else for the rest of his life. That's the least we could do. The least. It's just, they were just crossing the street. And evidently this guy had premeditated it and taken it upon himself and made this conscientious choice to murder these people. And this is Canada, people. The residential schools, the 215 children's bodies we recently found in graves. This asshole in London, Ontario that murdered this family. All of this, all of that. Hell, the notwithstanding clause that our douchebag conservative and, conservative racist party, the most racist party. You could argue all the parties are racist, but out and out, the conservatives take the cake on this. Using the notwithstanding clause to maintain power undemocratically. This is Canada, people. You can't say, oh, this isn't the real us, or this is so tragic. It's so bad. It's so unusual. This is the way it has always been, and we just keep letting it snowball and get bigger and get worse. And now we're just at this point where between, mass media technology, me being able to communicate with you right here, and the collective of that ball of history that has grown, it cannot be ignored anymore. You'll hear a lot of sort of talk as if this is all new and thus it's just shady propaganda and just like lefty talking points to try and deceive you. No, this has been ongoing. Hell, you can watch the news and even major media from the 90s, and you're going to come across plenty of people talking about racism, misogyny, how big a problem our history is, the violation of our rights and how passé we can be about it. You will find tons of it if you go looking. Or you could just be an idiot and believe that it's never been a problem until now because somebody else on the media told you that. Clearly remember from January 6th, the attack on Capitol Hill in the United States, a white guy, yelling at a black police officer that this racism thing is new. This was never a problem before. And that, he was black, but he was still a cop, unfortunately. But still, he's going, basically leaving it like, yeah, sure, man, if you want to believe that, whatever. Like this guy must have been in his 50s or 60s, right? And saying that this is new. Mind you, that's the United States, but when it comes to those sort of political talking points and frames of thought and around systemic racism and how our sense of privilege tends to react to that, a lot of it's the same. You'll find very little difference in sentiment there. Why do you think there's so many red mega hat wearing idiots here in Canada? Why do you think there's so many people in pickup trucks in Canada with Confederate flags on them? They have no connection to the southern U.S. in that capacity at all, outside of just agreeing with the fact that they want to send a signal that they think racism is cool, and that slavery was probably good and right. That's what they want to dog whistle. It's not about, it's about heritage, not hate. And it's like, you're from Edmonton. What are you talking about, heritage? It is about hate. We can't be sugarcoating this stuff. We can't be writing strongly worded letters anymore. I'm tired. Been working a lot these days, and it's been an exhausting time. I didn't spend an extraordinary amount of time writing this show. I know, I like in general, I just never do. I kind of have my few bullet points and I just go. I would like to improve on that, but man, it's just it's been an exhausting little while trying to get new music out there, which I try and prioritize over this show sometimes. But little by little, this thing's getting better. I'm starting to talk about this because this is my outro. I'm ending the show a little bit early today. I've just run out of things to talk about, and I'm tired. Let's go to YouTube. Gonna get my ducky. Get the ducky up there. Oh yeah, it's on mute. Here, let's get him in the corner there. There we go. There's our boy, king of Antifa. This duck. Hey, Diggs. I'm not sure who you are, but welcome to the show. I was just logging off, but the show's going to be available to watch after I log off. But yeah, thanks for coming on. I do this every Wednesday at 7 p.m. I don't think I've ever had anyone on Twitch join in. So, whoever you are, Diggs, thanks for hopping aboard. You just caught me at the wrong time. I was just about to sign off. So thank you to the folks that did watch live. I stream on Facebook and YouTube as well. And joined in on the chat in even the little capacity that they did this time. Yeah, so onward and upward for this show in the future. New music from the Rough Goes coming soon, probably in about the I'm going to set a date. It's about 5 weeks away, more than likely. So keep your eyes and ears out for that. Yeah. Sorry, I just got so excited by somebody actually watching on Twitch. I got a little distracted there. Wasn't expecting. I don't know if I've had anyone on Twitch watch the show before. So yeah, little by little, the show's getting better and a little more planned out every time. I feel like I've been doing this like kind of off the seat of my ass. I didn't even know how the saying goes. But anyway, I've just been kind of flying by the seat of my pants on this show for about a year now. Never really having a solid idea of what it's going to be, but I think it's just sort of kind of coming together. So yeah, thanks so much for tuning into the Rough Report. Love when you guys engage in the chat. If you ever do want to phone in, just let me know. You can always DM, email, whatever the case may be. Just let me know that you're interested in phoning in and having some sort of argument or discussion or ask a question, whatever. I just don't have an official phone line set up, so I gotta like plan for these things. It's basically how that is. So yeah, I think I covered everything I wanted to say there. You know, check out the links. Oh yeah, there we go. I always screw that up. You think I'd have this like mirror thing figured out by now, right? Check out the other links, especially Spotify. You want to listen to the 2 songs I have on Spotify because, quite frankly, I think they're very good. And I'm proud of them. And there will be very much more coming soon. I am plugging away at trying to make that happen. So until then, everybody worship Antifa Duck, our Lord and Savior, the King of Antifa. I think he has the authority to notarize our George Soros checks. I almost said George Thorogood. I guess he could be our god too. The people born in the 90s or later, you might have to Google who that is. Anyway, all right, I'm done. Thanks everybody for tuning in, and till next time, stay rough.